All right, ETM Hotep, welcome to our Divine Words Wednesdays. Except this Wednesday, we are doing a show called Welcome to the Sebayt-Dome. And the word Sebayt, for those who don't know, is a Iranian Kemet or ancient Egyptian word that means instructions, was a verb it means to teach. And it also ties into the word teacher and student or pupil. So Sebayt is instructions. So Sebayt-Dome is a word that we kind of coined. Doesn't have historical attestation, but it's a word we coined just to have a session where we can discuss different topics and address certain issues that we see pop up on social media, and to have a discussion and conversation about them. All right, so tonight is one of those nights. But before we actually move forward into it, I would like to start off our session as we are accustomed to doing, which with the offering formula. So I'll pass the mic over to our sonette, our sister Emiket.
Dua. And yes, I'm gonna go ahead and recite the offering formula. And it is what you are looking at on your screen. And just to quickly review, on the top part we have what is known as hieroglyphic or Sash nature, and the middle part is the transliteration, which is what I'm going to be reciting. And the bottom part is the translation in English. And for more details on that, you can always check the other recitation that we have on the archives on our YouTube page. So I'll go ahead and recite that, and feel free to recite it along with me. And I'm going to be reciting it in the name of the ancestors, which is known as Aku, and that is what you see over here. But you can replace that with the name of anybody that you'd like to include in an offering formula. So I'll go ahead and just recite it right now. Hotep Dinesu, Wasir Nebjadu, Netra Neb Abju, DF Beret Cheru, T Henket Ka Aped Ches Manket, Chet Nebet Neferet Wabet Anchet Nechaim, In Kani Imaku Aku Mahiru. And what he says is, an offering the king gives Osiris, Lord of Jadu, great God, Lord of Abydos, so that he may give up offerings in beer, bread, ox, fowl, alabaster, and linen, everything good and pure on which God lives, for the car of the revered ones, the ancestors, justified. Yes, and I'll go ahead and pass the mic along to Jao.
All right, Ika Dua. And before we get started, it's been a while since we've actually done a hangout. As far as on our Wednesdays, we've been keeping up with our Freestyle Fridays. But for those who might not be familiar with us, I guess we'll introduce ourselves. Reni Wujao Meneb Irimaat. My name is Wujao Meneb Irimaat, or Wujao for short. And I guess everyone else can introduce themselves one by one. Then we'll just go ahead and get started.
Hotep, it's your brother Hotep and Rob Mariaman. Hope y'all enjoy the show tonight. I pass the mic over to the brother Sean.
ETM Hotep, Rennie Sean. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoy the show tonight.
Hotep. How's my mic sound? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound broken up a little bit.
Okay, I apologize. Brother Antoine Jermaine, aka Hush Your Mouth. I'm a hostile and hop back in. ETM Hotep family.
All right.
ETM Hotep, Ren E, Imiket Aku, and yes, welcome to Sebayt-Dome. Hopefully you guys enjoy the show.
All right. So, now, so like I said, this is not our regular Divine Words Wednesdays. So we wanted to just have a general discussion. That's what the title of this session is: a general discussion related to the language of, or the ancient Egyptian language that we know as Iranian Kemet. We want to kind of open up as a general discussion because we haven't been doing a Divine Words Wednesday, so we want to kind of get back into the swing of things. But as a welcome to the Sebayt-Dome gives us a chance to have open discussions, anchored in ancient Egypt, so we could bring up different topics. So one of the topics that I wanted to bring up, well, I want to revisit something first, and that is the way we greet each other. We use the word Hotep in greeting each other, and it's come up recently. It's come up a couple of weeks ago, and as recent as last night, where we get questioned about the use of the word Hotep today, and whether or not the word Hotep actually means what we say it means, which is peace, and or did the ancient Egyptians use it as a greeting? And so this topic, we've addressed this before. We've addressed it on Facebook, and we've addressed it again in a Hangout session on one of our YouTube archives. But I just want to revisit it because it came up again last night. And but the question is phrased a little differently now that information has been given out. But basically, the gist of our use of the word Hotep today is more so used in place of an action that we all still do today to some extent, but we definitely did in historical times or ancient times. And that is what the word Hotep means. The word Hotep means offering. It is to offer or an offering. And so by extension, the meaning expanded from it being an offering to what the offering caused. So for example, by offering food or drink to someone, the person who partakes of the food or drink becomes satisfied, or they become content, relaxed, still, and at peace. All of these words, you can see the relationship between these words. Some of these words are used even synonymously today. So that's where we get peace out of it. Stillness, peace, tranquility. But it extends from eating food or drink or an offering that brings about satisfaction. So in historical ancient times, when we used to travel to visit one another or to conduct business, we had to travel very long and far distances. So we would be fatigued, or we would be famished. So when we reach our destination, we would have to eat or drink to replenish our fatigue, to relax. So if we were visiting a person, they would always offer you food or drink, and that was an offering. So that was the act of offering. And we still see this to this very day, where we go visit friends or loved ones, or go, over a relative's house. And the first thing that people do when they greet you at, welcome you in their house is, would you like something cold to drink? Would you like something to drink? Would you like a snack? Hey, we just had dinner. We got some, dinner, the food is still hot. Would you like a plate? We're still accustomed to doing that to this very day. And then if you visit a relative, especially your grandparents, you would dare not leave their house without a plate of food. Grandparents seem to always want to put food on you, and put some weight on you, regardless of how much you weigh or whatever the case is. But it's hard to leave your grandparents' house without a plate of food. So we would leave with an offering, and we would be greeted with an offering. And all of those instances is the act of Hotep. And that's what the word means. So we've said in the past that whether we say it to one another or not, the act still occurs. We still do it today, and we've done it in ancient times, and it still occurs pretty much in a lot of different communities across the world, on the continent, Europe, Asia, etc. That's what you do. So when we say it today as a greeting, we are taking those instances I just described, and we're just communicating it verbally. And we're saying, ETM Hotep, welcome in peace. So it's not something that to be asked, well, did the ancient Egyptians use it the same way we're using it? Well, the ancient Egyptians didn't have the internet. The ancient Egyptians didn't have cell phones to speak it when it's not in that particular context that I just described. So, and so I just wanted to kind of explain that, because sometimes these questions are coming with a different, some kind of undertone or underlying motive, you know. And I feel that particular question may be coming from a ulterior motive, where, you know, people are questioning our use of the word Hotep, or, you know, we call ourselves students, or students in the sense of we've taken up the study of ancient Kemet as a resource, as a valuable resource and things. But the subtle or passively aggressive, or passive aggressively accusing us of misusing ancient Egypt, its customs, its practices, its language, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to bring that up and address that's just not the case whatsoever. We are fully aware of the context in which Hotep was used historically, anciently, and how we use it today, and its difference. All right. So we choose to use the word Hotep today, and it is what it is. So ETM Hotep. So welcome again to the Sebayt-Dome, which would normally on today would be our Divine Words Wednesdays. So I just wanted to kind of open up with that, because we always open up with ETM Hotep. The word ET means to be in a state of come, but we don't talk like that today. We say welcome. So we say welcome, and then ETM, M is in, the word in, like to come in, preposition in, and then Hotep, welcome in peace. So we say ETM Hotep, welcome in peace. All right. So yeah, I'll open the floor. You know, I just want to kind of bring up that topic for the edification of anyone who will watch this video. If you have any questions, you know, leave a comment in the comment section, or join our Facebook group, Seshu Madi Meadow Nature, and we be more than happy to have these discussions. And we always have pretty fruitful discussions in the Facebook group as it is. So welcome new people, old people, chime on in. So, but I'll open the floor to different topics.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, you know, because a lot of people try to add, they try to nitpick at the word Hotep, but you know, like when I introduced myself, I said Hotep, it's your brother Hotep and Ra Mariama. I'm saying Hotep, meaning I'm offering you my intellect, and then I give you who I am. So I'm offering you my intelligence, and then I'm telling you who's offering the intelligence. So basically, I'm saying Hotep and Ra Mariama is offering you the intelligence or the intellect tonight. That's how I use it in this sense right here that we using it in. Tonight, I'm gonna be offering you my intellect on whatever we talking about. You know, so the word Hotep can be used many ways, but I'm giving you an offering, and I'm letting you know it's of intelligence, it's of intellect. So we may not be offering you a meal, but we offering you food for the brain.
Nice way of putting it.
You know what I'm saying? So that's just my take on it, you know. But a lot of people like to say we misrepresenting it, we misusing it, instead of asking us how are we using it. You know, ask the question to get the answer instead of implying what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a excellent point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think because when I was listening through all that, you know, the most thing that some people might bypass is you know, the meaning. I mean, if you're misrepresenting something, then you are actually using it out of its own, out of its meaning. So you have to look at the meaning of the word. Is it being used in its right context? And in this case, that is the case. But again, the issue comes when people just don't, like Satep says, I mean, ask if you're not aware, you know, just ask. And the thing that you witness a lot is, you know, actually, if somebody says something like you're misusing the word, for the most part, you find the people, you know, doing that are actually not well versed in the language. So then, you know, and that at that point is any conversation is always to edify them, you know, and let them know about, you know, what the word is, or what it is that, you know, that these things mean. Because if you can have an opinion, but you know, at the end of the day, if you if you're laying your opinion down, you have to have some foundation, some factual foundations, and this is where it's missing. So those people will not know what the word Hotep means by themselves, so they will assume that it is being used, it is being misused. But in once they realize or understand what it is, or understand the language and understand the meaning of the word, then they'll realize that it's not being misused, because it's actually used in its right context. And that's what is important. So anything else other than that goes out of the window.
Right. Because a lot of the brothers say ETM Hotep, and then they'll state their name. So they're basically welcoming you in peace, and they're stating their name. I say it a whole different way. I say Hotep, and then I say my name. So I'm using the word Hotep in a different way than not everybody on the panel, but people who present themselves on the panel in a different manner than I am. But I'm using the word in a different context, if y'all understand what I'm saying.
Yes, and the underlying part of it is you're offering something.
Right. I'm telling you who I am and what I'm offering. And the other brothers are saying they're welcoming you to the show, and they're telling you who they are. So the word Hotep is being used two different ways by multiple people on the show. But if you study the language, you'll know that.
Yeah, I guess my take on Hotep, in a positive fashion, when you say Hotep as an offering, it's almost using Hotep as a verb. How's my mic sound? Does it sound better now? Can you hear me?
Excellent.
Okay, yeah. It's like when you say Hotep as a verb, um, when you when you say it as an offering, Hotep as a verb, but when you say it as peace, then you're saying Hotep as a noun. Um, but nowadays we have people using Hotep as an adjective, and that's what's eating me up.
See, I didn't even want to go that deep. I didn't even want to go I wasn't even about to go into the grammar of it, because you put the noun. I didn't even want to go into all that. Go ahead, Antoine.
but we'll see. I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of issues with it being used as an adjective, like a Hotep brother or a Hotep nigga. So that's when they use Hotep as an adjective, which is totally improper and incorrect. But like you said, the way you use it is being you're offering us something. So using Hotep in the sense of a verb, which is, I think that is the original form based off of what we just read.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think people need to get the people who have a question for it, and with those motives, because some people just want to know Hotep, it means peace. Why do we greet each other? I don't know if they ask, why do we greet each other with hello, and where does that extend from and stuff, and hi and hello. I mean, we greet each other different ways, so that's just one way. And yes, it was used as a greeting in ancient Egypt, beyond the Hotep di Nasut offering formula that Sonnet Imiket recited at the beginning. Even outside that context, Hotep di Nasut of that particular formula. So it's used outside of that. It's actually used as a greeting. You can find it. I actually showed two primary sources where it's used as a greeting outside of the Hotep di Nasut formula before. But then when it came up again last night, third example was shown, which is in the Tale of Senuhe, where it's used, the actual phrase is used as well. And so you see it being used as a greeting, by the people. And so, so hopefully we can all get past that, and everyone who has that question or with ulterior motives, at least that camp of people can understand it and get over it, get past it. So, but that's that. So ETM Hotep, Hotep, and then we leave with peace. We say Shemem Hotep. And see, some people just shorten it to Hotep. People don't say ETM Hotep. They do, people just say Hotep. Should we say Uncle Jasaneb or the Uncle Jasaneb? Or, there's multiple ways we can greet each other in the language.
Yes, and that's just a natural occurrence with language, and people also have to understand that. Just as the way we say goodbye, and we shorten it to bye, and if you understand the etymology of that word, you understand how it was being used in its original context of God be with you and all of that. So these are just natural occurrences with language, and again, that also people have to put that into consideration. But that the case is always that, you know, opinions without proper understanding leads to this kind of stuff.
Right. And, you know, at some point we have to have some patience with people, but I've noticed that a lot of people that will ask questions with some ulterior motives will always seem to be the people who have not taken the time to do any studying. So I always start there and try to point people in a direction on what to read, what literature to get, and, you know, to put in some time. And if they're willing to, then that's very good. If not, then, you know, you go to step 2, you know. So I always give people a bit of a consideration at first and everything like that. And if they prove otherwise, then, you know, then you got to switch gears a little bit. Yep. So, so what else? What else been going on the social media or YouTube land? Anything related to Egypt or anything remotely related to Egypt, Kemet, the language, or whatever. And I want to say, give a shout out or say Hotep, ETM Hotep to everyone in the chat. All right. It's been a while. It's been a minute. So yeah, if you all have any questions, we don't have the audio, the phone line set up for this session, but I do have my eye on the chat. So if you do have a question or a comment or something you want us to answer or address or do our best, because not like we know everything, but we can walk this journey together. But if you have a question, type it in there, post it up. So how about anybody on the panel? Any other topics, subjects that's been going on? Oh, well, let's well, let me ask first. Wait, see if anybody has a topic. Anybody else on the panel?
I had some stuff that came up. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it kind of deals with the ear stella. I'm not sure if you guys seen this post or not, but dealing with the ear stella and going back to that being a prayer, and going back to that signifying that Kemet was based on a religion.
Okay.
So,
well, listen. See, the problem with that, I know what you're saying, and it's not just the ear stella. It's several of them. But the problem with that kind of conversation, because I see posts like that every now and then. It'll pass my timeline on Facebook and stuff. The problem, I mean, it's not just that topic, but the problem that we have in a lot of these different discussions is the lack of respect for nomenclature and a structured way of even having a discussion about a particular topic or issue. And because for some reason, a lot of us, we don't see this kind of study. 1 second, I don't know if you all can hear those notification sounds.
So I didn't hear them, but that was the post that I was referring to.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying the problem is, you know, a lot of people don't see this type of discussion or these types of discussions as a of high value or the same way that we would look at a discussion dealing with biogenetics or chemistry or astrophysics or medicine or law. Whenever we have those kind of serious discussions in those areas of study, we respect the nomenclature. We respect the fact that it has to be procedure applied. You know, we can't use terms loosely. We can't use street jargon in a way that we use terms in a common scenario or situation, and then bring it over into this specialized discussion in this specialized field of study. So ancient Kemet should be, you know, looked at the same way as far as these different discussions. We should have that kind of respect. And so when people toss around and say, well, hey, because of this stella, one of the ear stellas or pieces, represents a prayer, and therefore ancient Egypt practiced a religion or whatever, okay, well, what does religion mean in that context, that as that person is using it? And what does prayer mean in that context that they're using it? And how did you make that determination? What cultural anchor are you using? What was your method and tools to trace back to have that paradigm, and to make sure what did you do to assure yourself that you're not projecting a modern conditioned Western conditioned view on an African ancient view and paradigm? What did you do to safeguard that? And did you even care about safeguarding that? See, these are kind of things that we have to keep in mind. And so we have to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll say, did you care, or are you promoting something that lines up with your philosophy? I guess another comment was made that a lot of people who are studying Kemet or getting into African spirituality, they get into it, but they still carry the same standards or the same structure as their former religion.
Yes, and I think brother Sanjeti did a recent post on Facebook speaking to that, as a brief post where he basically said that a lot of us do carryovers. Like, we'll grow up as Christians, even if we didn't attend church every Sunday or go to Bible study every Wednesday or whatever, we are influenced by that. Whether we like it or not, we're influenced by that. And we have we're conditioned to have a certain worldview, and we position ourselves in that view a certain way. And so then later on in life, as an adult, we want to get into traditional African religions or spirituality, whatever the term that people want to use for it. We get into that kind of stuff, but then we do a carryover. So we don't realize that there's a process to this. Like it's like like agriculture, like farming. You got to plant the seed, fertilize it, let it grow and stuff. You're not going to just transplant something into an environment that it cannot thrive in. You have to plant something where, and in the conditions and in the environment and under the weather and everything that it can thrive in. So we have to make sure that that soil is fertile first, and the weather is right, and the seasons are appropriate for that particular seed and item that you're planting in. So we have to look at it that way. And so when we approach this, we have to kind of wipe our slate clean and really get into it. And it takes time. We can't microwave that. And that's what a lot of us tend to do. We want the fast, quick fix. I'll read a book and voila, I'm an expert. Let me package something up, get on YouTube, give me a nice web camera, some software, and now let me go get some followers, that type of thing. So we have to kind of slow down. I think everybody needs to slow down. I think everyone needs to slow down. So if you notice, I didn't even address the Interstellar specifically. And see, that's the thing. Normally, if the Interstellar comes up and somebody makes that statement, then we jump on the Interstellar, like, no, and we try to defend something that the premise in and of itself is wrong and faulty. So we can't move away. Like, if somebody asks you a question, and the question itself is faulty or based on faulty logic and things, you cannot go beyond that. You can't even attempt to answer the question. First, you got to fix the question. And that's also true for statements and claims. So when people make these claims and make these statements and things like that, or these comparisons, you first got to deal with that before you can even move forward and talk about the actual artifact and so on and so forth. So, but I see that being done a lot. Not with just that, but a lot of different things, so I'm trying to think of another example recently that I've seen.
I mean, an example would be the conversation you guys had last night on the Amara Squad, where the guy was trying to connect the mythologies with science, but he wasn't diverse or didn't have enough information about the language to understand paronymies and things of that nature.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And that's a common thing. I think a lot of people do that, innocently, unknowing, people do that. But we have to be careful. One of the things I said last night was that we have to be able to safeguard against pseudoscience and people just making up stuff. And if you don't have those checks and balances within your method, then you run the risk of just being wide open for misinformation, wrong information, being misguided, and the whole nine. So if I can sit here and just read an Egyptian text and see where you have 8 deities called the Ogdad, and then I just say, okay, well, man, it sounds like it's talking about dark energy, dark matter, and quantum mechanics, and quarks and biops, and the nucleus of atoms, and so on and so forth. Anybody could do that with about anything, you know, and that's why we see what we see today. Like I mentioned last night, people take the Ankh and say that those are the reproductive organs of a man and woman. The bottom piece is the penis, and the top piece is the uterus, and the 2 side bars are the fallopian tubes, you know. And people push that. They got a picture of it, they'll push it, people swear by it, you know, and the whole nine. So there has to be a method among the madness, you know. So that's what we were pushing, and we should continue to push method. And ancient Egypt was definitely about method. You know, we know it to be the phrase tep hesed, which is the best method or correct method in pursuing knowledge. You know, when we want to find out and know something, when we're querying an area of phenomena, you know, different phenomena, we want to know, you know, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. There's a method, there's an approach. And the ancient Egyptians took on that approach. They used the tool of mathematics and what's known today as the scientific method, which are steps and procedures on how to know when something is known. That's what science is about. And on the philosophy side, you get into epistemology, where, you know, you're talking about how, you know, how something is known. So those are the things that we were discussing yesterday, last night. And so the topic was, you know, science versus myth. Should it be a versus? And should science be science and myth be myth? And you know, what's the difference? So it was a good discussion. It started on social media, started on Facebook.
I missed that. What was the outcome?
Well, the outcome is
they got to walk. I'll say a little bit, then I'll let you finish it up if you don't mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What I got from it, what the outcome was that you got to let them walk together, not as one, but they can still walk together. But they're not the same thing though.
Right. And see what you know, like I said, this started on Facebook. So I start, you know, when we have these discussions, as I said, we have to start off with working definitions, because everyone walks around with a mental lexicon in their head. So we have to synchronize what we mean by what we say. So it's always good to start off with working definitions that we all agree on. So that's what I started off with on the topic, to define myth, and then to define science. And a myth is simply a narrative, a story. You know, comes from the Greek word mythos, and among the Greeks, mythos is from an unknown origin, and then you know, you can trace it out, and you find that it's actually related to the word medu in ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet. But the meaning is a story or a narrative, you know, something that is expressed. So
hold on real quick, because you said that pretty quickly. You said that mythos is related to Medu.
Yes, Medu. Yep.
I mean, it makes sense, because you just said what was mythos? It was unknown. What does Medu?
Well, I'm saying the origin, the etymological origin, goes back to Greek, and then from there it's unknown. So
okay. I thought you were saying the Greeks were saying it was unknown, because I know they called it sacred writing.
Oh yeah, what they call hieroglyphic, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Seshmetu, the writing system at all. The word itself, Medu. The word Medu means expression. It means somebody narrating something, saying something, you know, by extension to say. But we also have the word jed, which means to say, the verb jed, which means to say. We have Ra or Ro, which is also means utterances. Medu can mean utterances as well, but it's in a way of giving a narrative, to saying something, to telling something, narration, telling a story, and so on and so forth. Expressions. That's what we say. Medu nature is divine expressions or divine narrative. So, but back on mythos or myth, the working definition is that a myth is a narrative. All right. Now, but what myths consist of is a narrative that makes use of figurative language or figurative expression. And by figurative, I mean they make use of what we call today metaphor, allegory, symbolism, and etc. All the different various figures of speech. And so on the surface, this is why the word myth is used today with the sense of fiction or made up or make believe, kind of connotation to it, because of the figurative way that figurative speech that was used within the narrative. All right, so it's not literal. And so that's where you get the whole fairy tale kind of sense of it and everything like that. But it's not. Or in ancient times, what we call today a myth was the method and way, the manner in which information was documented, whether it was documented in writing or spoken orally. It was put into a figurative expression. So you have the reality, then you have the symbol. You have the reality or you have the metaphor. You have the reality or you have the allegory, and those two travel together among initiation environments, where within these initiation environments, the students or the initiates were told the myth, which is the figurative narration or story, but they were also aware of and taught the realities behind all of those various different figures of speech. And so they understood what was going on. Once you separate the reality from the figurative way of documenting it, then you have a problem. As long as it's kept together, everything is okay. And so this is what happens. People grabbed a hold of the myth and lost the reality, or didn't keep up with it, or didn't have access to the reality behind it. And then they run with the myth, and then the myth grows its own legs and becomes an entity in and of itself. And this gives birth or coincides with belief systems. And so people use that belief systems and they make that synonymous with religion. So a lot of people in the conscious community are against religion because they're tying it back to the belief, which ties back to this sense of fairy tale, myth, and the whole nine with that. So that part of the discussion is to kind of straighten all that out. We gotta sort out all of this stuff first before we can even move forward in finding it out. So that's what I offered.
What about and I guess this is kind of, I mean, it's still dealing with myth, but it's kind of going away from Kemet. But what about the Bible, as far as some people will say that the astrological study of the Bible, where they connect different things in the Bible with astrological events, as far as like the Easter with the cross and the alignment of the equinox or what have you, making a cross. So that lines up with Easter based on the the dates and the following after the first full moon or what have you. So occur in the Bible, even though it's myth, they still find those connections with astrology.
Yeah, and that's kind of that kind of came up last night as well. And but that's what I'm saying. We have to safeguard ourselves from people just randomly, haphazardly just making these correlations that really don't exist, or they can't demonstrate and confirm it or prove it, to make it plain. And so it's speculative. And sometimes, so we have to have a way of anchoring in and falsifying it. This is why we say myths are myths and science is science. Because if it's not falsifiable, then you cannot put it into the category of science. And so what people want to do is they want to pit them against each other. And I'm not saying people do it intentionally, but this is the kind of way that it's discussed. You know, it's either this or that. And no, in Africa, it was both. Both was accepted perfectly fine. You know, you can do the science. Science is something that you do, and then the result of what you do becomes a fixed body of knowledge, or I shouldn't say fixed, but a body of knowledge that's subject to change once new data is discovered. But now how you document it and how you transmit it is when you get into a method of transmission, which is what a myth is. A myth is a method to transmit. It's a narrative to transmit information. So I can take something that is factual, observable, confirmed, repeatable, and the whole thing, and then I can express it to the next person or to a whole group of people in a form of a myth, in a figurative way. You know, I can take, like I mentioned it last night. I don't know if I did a good job of giving an example, but I was using lightning, you know, thunder and lightning. You know, we know the science behind all of that, but I can convert that science and that data and what we can observe, and then I can create a narrative about it in a very figurative, metaphoric way, and say thunder is this, lightning is this, and this is caused from that. I can anthropomorphize lightning and thunder, or say something is doing something to cause it, you know, and whatnot. So it's not something that you would pit against one another. And then in Africa, this is something that was done all day, every day. This was something that's not even was, it still is to this very day, you know. And you know, like, what do you think the deities represent? They are mnemonic devices to pass down something that is of high importance to the people within the culture. These are cultural important highlights, you know. Like, for example, if the culture, let's just take example. Let's just take a European community, right? A European community that has no idea how to bathe, and so everybody is smelly, funky, and everything. Then all of a sudden, they discover some cleansing agent, and they're able to bathe and clean themselves, and they smell really good. So the act of bathing, because it's so important, and it's so important to the people, and they want to make sure it gets passed down to the next generation, and so on and so forth, they may deify bathing and the tools to do so. Soap may become a deity. You know, soap and water, toothbrush and a comb may become deities. Those are 4 deities. They mess around and have their own god of bathing. You know, so I'm just saying, I'm just using it as an example. Whatever's important to the culture, because remember, culture is the ultimate foundation and underlying ground where a group of people can anchor themselves, and it gives them a direction on how to solve their problems in a collective way. So what you have to plant within that fertile soil we call culture are seeds of solutions, and seeds of important things, seeds of things that are important, seeds of things that work for the benefit of the whole, and so on and so forth. So you create your deities and you plant them in the seed or the soil I'm calling the culture. So this is one thing that brother Uncle Keck speaks about when he calls himself a real black atheist. And if you notice, when he says that, he always talks about how the gods of different cultures is for them. And so to be an atheist is to be against their gods, not that you don't believe in, you know, something higher than you or whatever the case is, you know. So, you know, but he can speak on that, but I'm just showing you the connection to that. But that's what culture does. Culture provides us with fertile ground to plant these different seeds. So these deities are attached to the culture. And this is why people have a problem. Like, you know, why are we Africans in the diaspora, African Americans, so on and so forth, how can we possibly worship and be conditioned under the same deities that are of the people that kidnapped, raped, and enslaved us. That just seems like that's a sickness to do that. That's a problem, you know. So, but going back to the topic, myth versus science, they shouldn't be made at odds with each other. They should be used together. And in fact, in ancient times, myth was the tool to transmit science. That's why I always say that certain texts, not all texts, but certain texts are the world's first scientific journals. Because what's a scientific journal? A journal is a way of documenting and communicating scientific data to the public or to a group of people, to readers or whatever. So these texts, stored data or treated scientific data, but they just chose to represent it in a figurative way. And unless you're part and parcel of that culture, you won't know the realities behind the figurative way. So, you won't know what Ma'at really stands for in this context, what the feather really stands for, what does the heart stand for. When you see the scale and the heart on the scale, you may not know what the reality is behind what is really meant by that. So you're just stuck with the myth. You're like, okay, man, the deceased is traveling, he's walking, he's being escorted by Enpu or whoever else, and he comes to the scale and his heart is weighed against this feather. How can a heart possibly be lighter than a feather? So it's not literal and all that stuff, but people still can't figure out the realities because we are so separated from the system that kept those two things together. And that's the importance of institutions today. See, today we call it institution, but back then it's like houses of initiation houses. I mean, and those still exist today. A lot of people get initiated into Ifa traditions. I know a lot of people are favor that tradition because a lot of people doing their DNA testing, sending their DNA off and getting the results back, and they find out that they have DNA traced back to West Africa, which is understandable because of the transatlantic slave Holocaust and everything. So then they look into West Africa and the traditions that are there now. And then, so Ifa, Ghana, Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria, the Congo, whatever's being practiced, this is what people resonate with and they gravitate towards and get involved with, So it and it's still done to this day. But anyway, I don't want to keep dragging it on. But yeah, that was the topic. But it was a good subject. And I think hopefully people can read the post on Facebook, a couple of posts that came out of it, and listen to the show. Minus the last, it was a 5 hour show last night, and the last 2 hours of it spiraled into something else, So I would recommend people listen to the first 3 hours. And it was good. Myself, brother Asar Hotep, Uncle Kek, Sister Naya, and brother Alan. So he basically represented the opposing view, or somewhat of an opposing view, but it was a good discussion.
Yep. Nahisi and Reggie.
Yes, brother Reggie and Nahisi. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So brother Reggie was there, gave his input in the beginning. So yeah, that's good. But people had to realize, and then creation, like, the subject of creation, that was another kind of side topic of creation. We didn't get into that too much on the show, but on Facebook it came up. And I was going to ask the question last night, so maybe I could just present it here and see what you all think about it. Why do you all think that most, if not all, indigenous cultures have a creation story? Like, why does it seem necessary to the people to even have a creation story? because most indigenous cultures have one, if not all. Like, you know, we can survey the planet, but you know, if you try to just recall from memory, pretty much every indigenous culture has a creation story. So why is that? What are y'all thoughts on that? Or those in the chat, because I'm monitoring the chat. I'm gonna say Hotep to everybody in the chat. I see we have quite a few. Asaram Ka. Oh, Sister Naya is, I don't know if she's still there, but Hotep, she was part of the conversation last night. Lisa, Strife, Marad, Monica, Hotep, Jody Bakhmat, Black History. I'm a brother's keeper. Mac Tip. All right. So yeah, Brother Tony, and common side effects. So yeah, anybody chime in? I'm monitoring the chat. You know, we just having a kind of open discussion. But yeah, what do y'all think on the panel? What do y'all think? Why, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But my thoughts are because you know, as humans, you know, we observe things, and you know, always you know, there's the question of how do we come into existence? And then with this question, so you know, we have all these different cultures that observe everything around nature to try to explain how everything comes into existence, obviously, you know. So and then within that question, the, you know, explanation comes with the, you know, through the creation stories, you know, from all those different cultures. But it is to explain how we come into existence.
Okay, good. Anybody else? I see the brother Chris, Hotep brother Christopher Withers on the chat. He said it gives them a place in nature. And Lisa said even little kids will ask, where did we come from? So basically Lisa's saying that it comes out of a want to know origins, you know. So okay, so I'm Kyle. When you look at the noon, it's inert, but when a gravity pocket appears from nowhere, it will suggest a creative force. All right, see, I saw I'm Kyle trying to get into some science now. But so yeah, so anybody else got a take on that? I mean, I think, you know, all of those are part of it that was said so far. You know. But now just think about this. What is creation? Oh, somebody unmuted. Go ahead, brother Sean. Sunshine.
Oh yeah, no. I just wanted to throw something out there that kind of goes along with what we're discussing from a perspective of Theophilo Banger. When he in his book, he says, in an attempt to understand all that exists, human beings have to know from the start that there are things of which they are ignorant. It is to this unknown aspect of reality that the text copied by Amines refers to every mystery, every secret of nature. Such an awareness indicates an excellent commitment to scientific exactitude. So I think that's where we are in understanding or trying to understand nature, the existence of everything, and how it all comes about. Is sometimes we just have to stop trying to be so smart and just deal with what we can deal with at that particular moment in time, if that makes sense to anybody.
Yeah. As I said, I think everybody is on it. Only thing I would add to it is that we have to understand what creation is. Like when people use it, like a creation story, you know, what is a creation story and stuff like that. And certain people have a view of creation as an event that has a start and finish, and that it took place sometime in the past. Like creation took place back then. And so I think that that's a misrepresentation of what creation is, at least from an African perspective, you know, and that's one of the differences between the different paradigms. You know, another difference, just to give another example, is coming from a Eurocentric paradigm, or not even say Eurocentric, I say Abrahamic paradigm, where they set up and established their creator outside of creation, where their creator, be it Allah, God, Jesus, Yahweh, or Elohim, whatever the names, will create, but then be separate from that which it creates, and then exist separate from that which it creates, and then periodically interfaces or interacts with creation, either to do harm, punish somebody, or reward somebody, or whatever the case is, you know. And that's different than a lot of African communities. They don't see it that way. So what I would like to add to that, what everybody else said, is that I believe indigenous cultures were inspired by nature, and they couldn't help but to be inspired by nature, because nature, they're part and parcel of nature. And so what you have is kind of close to what we call today biomimicry, where, and by that I mean biomimicry, I mean the imitation of life. You know, bio meaning life, and mimicry meaning to mimic, to imitate. And so what was observed in nature and what took place that was beyond the control of the observer, there was a tendency to mimic it, because it was understanding that by mimicking it, you can reproduce the same results. So it became imperative for indigenous cultures as a cultural foundation to figure out, or ask the questions, as you said, Sean, to ask the questions and figure out how do things come into existence? Because think about it, in order for something to come into existence, that in and of itself has to represent success. Because if it wasn't successful, it wouldn't be there. So to understand the processes that it took to get there, or to become what it is, and you can mimic that process, then you yourself, or you and your community, or whatever, can also be successful in whatever it is that you want to do. So we have this imitation and this biomimicry going on. So creation, or the cosmogony or cosmogony, becomes the study of the generation of systems, because this is what's observed, and that's what a creation story is. It is a documentation of the culture's idea of how systems are generated, how things come into existence. That's why most of the creation stories starts off in the beginning, or, you know, some distant time, but a lot of times it's not time wise, it's just as a priori in the process of becoming. And this process of becoming is always going on. And this is where it changes from culture to culture, though. Some people believe that the process took place in the past, and it's an open and closed process. Others have a different paradigm and say the process is forever ongoing, and we are in it, and we are unfolding with it, and so on and so forth. You know, so I'm saying, so, you know, to my question, why the indigenous cultures, you know, why do we think they have a need, or why do they even exist? Why do these creation stories exist? And I you know, I think that it is a byproduct of life itself, because you're part and parcel of nature, and you're observing what goes on in nature, and you know, and you're imitating, because if you think about it, a lot of things that people do are by imitation. Whether you imitate your fellow man, or you imitate something in nature, you know, like you look at a car engine, or not just, let's look at an airplane. An airplane imitates a bird. So even though an airplane, we would say that's artificial, but it actually imitates something natural. Look at a car engine. The components of a car engine is artificial, but it imitates the systems within the human body. You know, you got the gasket, you got the air filter, which is the lungs, you got the gas tank, which is the stomach, you know, the pistons, whatever. You know, I'm not a mechanic. You know what I'm saying? So we can do that. Look at the computer. The computer is more powerful. We think it's more powerful than the brain or whatever, but the CPU and how the computer works and stuff like that is similar to how the human brain works. So we do this even to this day, you know. So that's what I would add to that. But I'm trying to keep up with the comments too. So let's see what we have here. There are questions that needed to be answered. Thus, the explanation was created. Why are we here? Who made all of us? Yeah, now that's another topic. You know, we get into, you know, who made all of us. And, you know, I think that's when a lot of people differ. Humans are the only primates who can contemplate their demise. Thus drives us to think of a beginning. All right. Closest creation to a mind is a computer. Yep. The only way a computer can get data is from a programmer. The thinking is we come from a programmer. African communities don't we pay reverence to the elders, not only as a mark of respect, but also because they are a direct link to our own lineage, tradition, and history. Yeah, you know, there's a chain, you know, and the chain and the knowledge is passed down. But you know, that's my kind of take or 2 cents on it. I mean, you know, there's more to that, but I just wanted to kind of just touch on that. But that's what I wanted to bring up last night in the conversation, because it kind of ties in a little bit to what was discussed, myth versus science, because these observations and things were done, and the need to understand it and document it, whether it was orally or in writing, was done so by what we call today myth. See, we take myth for granted because myth was the actual technology, you know, a necessary technology. You know, we really take it for granted. I mean, think about this for a second. We're really spoiled today because we don't have to memorize all of the vocabulary in the English language today. Out of the entire vocabulary of the English language, we only use a very small percentage in our everyday communication. But when we want to, we can have a dictionary to go to, a lexicon or whatever. In ancient times, they didn't have that privilege or benefit of doing that. So the people, so the lexicon, the meanings of every single word in any given language had to be retained in the minds of the people at all times, or you lose it. It's just that simple. So because of that situation, they had to be very creative on how to keep that up and pass it on and pass it on. So you have a lot of what we were discussing last night: puns, paronymy, homonyms, homophones, homographs, all, you know, whether it's writing or spoken, all of that's going on, you know. And then it became a curious thing. Words that sound alike but are two different things, they knotted them together in the form of a deity, and then placed these deities in the form of a narrative and created a story behind it. So one of the examples given last night by Hotep was the name or the word Amen. Amen means to create. Amen means the right hand or a hand. It became known as the right hand, which is the functioning hand. And its inverse is Kanum. It also means hidden, you know, all these different things. Now we will think that all those are one word, but as we'll learn as we walk through this grammar within the language, we'll kind of discover and learn what a word really is, and we'll kind of sharpen up the way we talk about that. What is the notion of word? What is a word? Are these the same words? Are these different forms of the same word, different word forms of the same word? Or do we have a case of, you know, paronymy, homonyms, and so on and so forth? All right, so we got to keep that in mind. But I don't want keep going there. So anybody else got something?
No, not really.
Something else on that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, but you know what? This is a perfect time. I think this is a perfect time for me to share this real quick, because we're talking about creation stories, right? So let's do this. Matter of fact, who said that? I think Lisa said it in the chat. Let me scroll. Okay, and Asar Mk. The thinking is we came from a programmer. Okay, he said that, and then Lisa earlier said, there are questions that need to be answered, and thus explanations were created. Why are we here, and who made all of this? You know, the who and the why, and you know whether there's a programmer and so on and so forth. All right. So let me just share this kind of tied, you know, to kind of talk about this. See if I can get it. And y'all let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna wait make sure it shows up on the YouTube. I can see it's definitely a delay.
Yes, it's there.
Okay, yep, there we go. All right, you see my cursor, I think. Yep. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about something real quick. I want you all's thoughts on this. You know, we don't have to commit ourselves to anything, but let's just go have at it on this. So what you see on the screen, I have a question. What are the components of the atomic structure? And I hope you all that's on the chat watching, make sure you change your settings on the video to 720 HD, the video settings, so you can so to be clear, you can read. But I'm gonna read this. It says, what are the components of the atomic structure? Atoms are the basic building blocks that comprise all matter in the universe. Each of the elements on the periodic table is composed of uniquely structured atoms. The elements are given different physical properties depending on their atomic building blocks. The atoms themselves are comprised of a different number of protons, neutrons, and electrons, depending on the particular element. Each one of these separate subatomic particles has its own unique properties. So you can see here the diagram of a typical atom. You have the proton and neutron together inside of what's called the nucleus. And then you have the electrons that orbit the nucleus. So it looks like a solar system. And I know, you know, all of us should remember this from grade school. You know, first time we were introduced this in school, elementary school. All right, so let me go to the next. Okay, so now the nucleus. What is the nucleus? The nucleus of an atom contains the majority of the atom's mass and is composed of protons and neutrons, which are collectively referred to as nucleons. The much lighter electrons orbit their atom's nucleus. The number of protons and neutrons comprising an atom's nucleus determine the atom's mass number, sometimes referred to as nucleon number. All right, so that's about the nucleus. Now, protons. Protons are positively charged particles found in an atom's nucleus. Along with neutrons, protons account for the vast majority of an atom's total mass. The total number of protons in an atom represents that atom's constant atomic number. Individual protons have a weight of 1.0073 on the carbon-12 scale, which is the scale that measures atoms' relative mass. Okay, and we go to neutrons. Neutrons are the particles with a neutral charge which share the nucleus of an atom with the protons. At 1.0087 on the carbon-12 scale, neutrons are so similar in weight to protons that the two particles are often considered to share the same general weight, a relative mass of 1. Where the number of protons in each element is a constant number, the number of neutrons can vary. For this reason, an element's mass number can vary from atom to atom. Remember, the proton and neutron are in the nucleus. So now we get to the electrons. The electrons are negatively charged particles that orbit the nucleus of an atom. And mind you, I know everyone listening, you should be familiar with this in grade school, or at least I'm taking y'all back there. a lot of people hated hated math and science, so don't hate me. So these particles are much lighter than protons and neutrons, with a relative mass of 1/1836, the mass of protons. Electrons orbit the nucleus in a series of levels, often referred to as energy levels, and even also shells. Each of these levels can hold a specific number of electrons, the first level being the closest to the nucleus and the subsequent levels being further and further away. Yeah, if y'all hear thunder, it sounds like we're in the middle of a thunderstorm right about now. So yeah, just in case if I get cut off, I'll try to come back. You know, thunderstorm's kind of close. All right. The number of energy levels in an atom depends on the total number of electrons. Electrons will always settle into orbit at the lowest available level. So remember, what to take from here is that each of these orbits can contain a certain fixed number of electrons. All right, that's important to know. So what are those fixed numbers? Okay, so here is an example of the electron shells or the energy levels. All right, so the first shell, so you see this first line, you see the dot in the middle represents the nucleus. Then you see this first line going around. This represents the first energy level or first shell. The first shell can hold a maximum of 2 electrons. The second shell can hold a maximum of 8 electrons. So you see 8 dots around it. The third shell can hold a maximum of 18 electrons. And the fourth shell can hold a maximum of 32 electrons. Now, this is a fixed pattern among all atoms that exist. It's just that as we read a couple of slides before, that it differs from atom to atom based on the number of electrons or protons and neutrons. All right. So now what does this mean? So one, the first shell can hold a maximum of 2, no more than 2, no more than 8 for the second, 18. So remember this series, 2, 8, 18, 32. And if we could keep going and the numbers will change, but there's a fixed series of numbers. Just remember that. And I'm sure, you know, I'm probably jarring the memory of y'all from grade school about this. So now what we're looking at is an actual atom. I mean, we're looking at the components of an atom. All right. All right. Now we're going to the periodic table itself. Again, don't get mad at me, because if y'all didn't like chemistry or physics, I don't even think they called it physics in school. We just said science, but this should bring back some memories. So here's the periodic table of elements. Now, why do they call it the periodic table? Why do you word period? It's because certain things are repeat itself periodically. All right. So on this periodic table of elements, now notice that you have columns and you have rows. On the first row, we have H, which stands for hydrogen. And all the way over here on the right, we have helium. That's still on the first row. So we have 2 elements on the first row of the periodic table. On the second and third row, we have 8 elements. So you see 2 here and then 6. So the second and third row has 8 elements. The fourth and fifth row has 18 elements. And then the sixth row has 32. Now, the way this is arranged may be a little confusing, but it's 32 if you count the first 2 right here, and then it breaks down below because it, you know, and not to make this chart really, really wide, it's written down below. So you got to count these here, and then go up and count the rest going across. So if you add them all up, they add up to 32. So what is this saying? This right here is showing the same numeric sequence that we can observe among the atom itself. Now we're outside the atom and we're looking at several atoms on a periodic table that exhibit the same numerical sequence. And this is fixed. So now the thing is that each of these elements on this chart are made up of the same components, which are 3: protons, neutrons, and electrons. All of these elements have that. What makes them distinct from one another is the quantity of those 3 things and their arrangement. Okay, so I'm just gonna say that one more time. What makes lithium different from copper is the quantity of those 3 particles, which is protons, electrons, neutrons, and their arrangement. All right. So that's what makes the distinction. So they're made up of the same stuff, but how much of that stuff and the arrangement is what makes it distinct. So think about that. Now, I know you may be like, well, why, this is like science. Why are we dealing with this? How does this tie into to Kemet, Egypt, and the language and everything? This is like a side, like kind of a sidebar discussion, but I'm bringing this up because we were just talking about creation, and we were just talking about, creation stories, cosmologies, cosmogonies, whatever, and whether there's a creator, like who created us, like how do we get here, and things like that. But let's look at this. What we can observe, what we can observe, and everyone will have to bear witness to, is that in the atom itself, we can observe a fixed pattern. We can observe this pattern, 2, 8, 18, 32. Now, not all elements will have it because of the quantity. For example, was helium. Helium only has 1 energy level, so it has 2 electrons. So it wouldn't have a second shell, third shell, fourth shell, etc. But this pattern is fixed. So now notice that within the atom itself, we recognize a pattern, and it's based on a numerical series. Now, outside of an individual atom, now if we go to the whole table of all of the elements, we see the same pattern. So it's one thing for the pattern to be observable within the atom, but then to step outside the atom and look at a bunch of atoms as elements and see the same pattern. What does that say? Now, this is as if all of these different elements are being arranged and doing something around some other nucleus type of thing. I'll just say thing, because they exhibit the same number, numeric. Now I'm hoping I'm not losing anybody or anything by going over this.
No, it's understandable. So it's like what you're seeing is you're seeing the same pattern on a micro level and on a macro level.
Exactly. That's good. That's exactly. I'm glad you said that. Micro and macro. So here we have a simultaneous phenomenon going on the macro and micro level at the same exact time. So we have this level of sameness and a level of difference going on simultaneously. And we say this phrase. Today. We will say something like, "Oh, it's the same difference." And this is what we're looking at: the same difference. All of these elements that you're looking at right here on the chart are made up of the same stuff, but they only are differentiated because of the quantity and the arrangement of that stuff. Notice I said differentiation, differentiated. So in terms of the discussion we had just a second ago about creation and like the brother Asar MK and Lisa said, that the indigenous cultures beg the question of, okay, how did things come about and who put it here? Basically, the answer to who and stuff. Now, not getting into describing who or whatever. One thing that we can observe today, especially, and it's similar to what the ancients did as well. Now, I'm not saying that the ancients had a periodic table of elements or anything like that, but I'm saying that the act of observing and seeing these patterns or these sequences of something, we are specifically talking about a pattern or sequence of energy levels in an atom, and it's the same series and sequence on the whole periodic table of elements as a whole. Now, what does that say to us? That says that there is a pattern going on. We are looking at a design or pattern. If those words can be used synonymously, pattern and design, we're looking at one. It is a pattern of numbers, a sequence of numbers, and it repeats itself. It's repeatable. That's why they call it a periodic table of elements. On the right-hand side, you have what's called the noble gases, because the most exterior shell or energy level of these particular elements is balanced, is full, in terms of how the number. So that's what we're observing, a pattern. So here, what we can definitely say that there's a pattern that exists in the elements. Now, these elements make up the things in the world. So if we can observe it on this level, the atomic level, and on a periodic level of all of the elements known to us to date, then what does that say for the gross matter of everything? Because you combine these elements to form molecules, the molecules combine to form whatever, and so on and so forth, the different things, whether they're animate, inanimate, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is what we're looking at is the constituents of all of matter known to us. So we are observing a pattern at this level of matter. Okay, so go ahead, Damo. I'm glad you said something, because I had a long pause, and I said, man, I'm not trying to be MC Iron Lung tonight too much.
Yeah, I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson. He had a chart called the Cosmic Abundances of Elements, and he was describing some of what you're talking about. He was talking about some of the same elements involved in the life on Earth are the same in the universe. And he brought up the hydrogen. There's hydrogen on Earth. There's hydrogen in the universe. Helium. There's helium in the life on Earth. There's helium in the universe. Oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, and also other elements. And he was, so to say that you were bringing it from the, what'd you say, the micro?
Yeah.
To
micro, macro.
And then he even brought it further. Like he said, it all comes to, he was bringing in the universe and the cosmic also, like as above, so below. It just brought that to mind when you was talking about the different elements.
Yeah, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. What he did was he brought in the percentages. So he said that on Earth, carbon exists in this percentage, or in the or our bodies. Our bodies are made up of a certain percentage of carbon, certain percentage of oxygen, certain percentage of whatever the first couple of elements are on this periodic chart. And so then he used the same percentage and gave the data for what's known in the universe, and they correlate. They directly correlate to what is going on around us and in our own bodies. So he was basically saying that there's an intimate relationship between a micro, which is us and everything on Earth and stuff and so on and so forth, with that of the universe. There's a direct correlation and relationship there. So that's what he was showing. So that was a real good. I saw that lecture. I forgot the name of it, but yeah, I'm familiar with that. And that speaks to what I'm saying here, is that there's a macro micro relationship going on that you cannot separate, and that is continuous and is going on at all times, almost like a symbiotic relationship between a micro and macro that's going on. So what we can definitely see is that there's a pattern, there is a design. Now, there are people that that promote Abrahamic traditions and belief systems that talk about God and stuff like that, being a creator, and they describe God as X, Y, and Z, and they want to say that God is the one that's doing all this and everything. Not to address that or to speak on that. What we can speak on in a very scientific way and observe is this pattern that I'm showing right here, from the atom itself to the periodic table of elements. This periodic table of elements is showing essentially a design, a pattern that's repeatable, that repeats itself. Okay, so there's a sequence that happens, that mathematics out there. I forgot, one of you all said something about math. There, you know, there's numbers involved that we can check and things like that. So you know, I brought this up because somebody, you know, Asaram Ka mentioned, alluded to, you know, a programmer, and then Lisa alluded to, you know, the Who. And so regardless of identifying a programmer or identifying a Who, what we can identify is this pattern. And a design or a pattern implies a designer or a person responsible for the pattern. Now, when I say a person, that's where everything goes haywire. Because if I say it implies a person, then we got to describe and define, what do you mean by a person? What would anybody mean by a person, etc. That's why I leave that alone and just work with what everybody can see, observe, and agree on. No one can deny this at all. I mean, you know, unless you just, I can't even say, but so what this, you know, there is, you know, there's a pattern here. So I'll just stop there. I'm not going to read too much into this or anything like that, but I wanted to kind of share this to kind of tie into the conversation we just had about the creation, actually myth versus science, and spill over into creation. I think this ties in because this is science. This is something we learn in school under science, under the umbrella of science. You know, it's in science books and so on and so forth. Now, what if I wanted to explain this and what I was saying in terms of the relationships between the elements and the quantity of the components and the arrangements and how they repeat every, like, I believe it's every eight elements, there's a repeat. And if you notice that this is not far off from, well, hold on, let me pause that for a second. A lot of people understand that or you'll hear the term that, or the phrase that math is a universal language, that math is the language of the universe. Math is, you know, universal language is a very objective language, therefore it's universal. And, you know, people say numbers don't lie. Even on the street, they say numbers don't lie. People lie, but numbers don't lie. You know, that's what people say nowadays. But there's another thing that people say is universal, which is music. They'll say music is universal. Music is, you know, sounds, tones, and so on and so forth. But they'll say that's universal, and they say math is universal. This is something that we all pretty much hear and we say. So we got this repetition of every 8 elements and so on and so forth. And then in music, we have a repetition of scales, octaves being 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then do again. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then do again. You know, every 8. And then, you know, the scales and then the chords that will actually pair up and merge together like molecules. There's certain elements here on this element chart that will not combine and be stable. And then there's other elements that can combine and be stable, like H, and then where's O? H and O will combine in a certain quantity, in a certain arrangement, and they will bind in a molecule we call water, H2O. So it's two atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen that will combine to form the molecule of water. But there's certain elements that just won't combine and be stable or whatnot. Then some of them will combine and you get hurt, as you learn in chemistry. So music does the same thing. Certain notes go together and form a chord, and certain notes just don't go together. They sound horrible. They have no harmonic, whatever. They just sound horrible. So it's just interesting. I'm just saying this stuff because it's just interesting. These are the kinds of things that's really interesting. Maybe some people can do some more some studies on, and probably some studies out there that talk about everything that I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess this ties also to what you were talking about before. I guess you had this word, I believe it was biomimicry.
Yes.
And with what the ancients would do, observing nature, and and because as if all the basic elements of the patterns that you see is found in everything, so you find, obviously it will be mimicking itself in all that is around us, and so it would make sense that understanding that there will be a need or crave to try to observe how all that mimics itself in different aspects in nature.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's it. So how these elements, I know I don't have it on the screen anymore, but how these elements go from one element over to the next and to the next and to the next is based on the quantity and the arrangements of those same three substances. So if you think about it this way too, like let's take a common substance that we all use. I don't know the exact chemical formula for it. I used to, but let's take table salt. Let me just quickly look up what the chemical formula is for salt, because it's a molecule. Let me just see. I bet you somebody in the chat probably know it by heart. Let's see. Sodium chloride. Okay, so sodium chloride, and the abbreviation is NaCl. Okay. So that's salt, and we can do this with a whole bunch of things. We could take water. We know this H2O, salt, which is sodium chloride, which is NaCl, and everything. So that's on the level of molecules. Now remember, everything I just said, water and the sodium chloride, we're labeling them different things. So we say we call one water and we call the other salt or sodium chloride for its chemical name, and we label them different because they exhibit different properties and we use them for different things. You can't drink salt, but you can drink water. You can put salt in water, it's soluble, all that kind of stuff or whatever. But think about it, they are made up of the same material, which are at protons, neutrons, and electrons on the atomic level. So you have the molecular level on the molecule, and then you go to the atomic level. They are made up of the same things, or I should say subatomic level, because those are the particles that make up the atom. So you got the subatomic, the atomic, and then the molecular level. So look how it unfolds. So what happens is you are walking, you are traveling from a sameness into a distinctness, or a sameness into a differentiation thing. You start off the same, but then you end up different. So remember what I said, biomimicry, what you were saying, Emiket, the need to mimic life, because life is an unfolding. So cosmogony or cosmogony is the generation of systems, how something unfolds. How does something come into existence? How does it become what it is? And so there's an unfolding. So there is an inference that could be made that it starts off from the sameness and marches and walks its way to to become the difference. So therefore we have the same difference going on simultaneously. So it's a safe, we observe this, and so we can infer this throughout. And so therefore, this is what encompasses a creation story. So in the beginning was God, Spirit of God hovered across the waters, and then they use it in a figurative way, which we call a myth. So it's explained in a figurative way. So y'all get that? You understand that? So it's coming from the sameness. So, in Kemet, so let's narrow down to Kemet and anchor into Kemet. You have this story, the book of knowing the transformation of Ra and overthrowing of Hotep, where Ra is unfolding, and the word used for evolving, changing, unfolding, or coming into being is the word Keper. So you have this process being deified or personified as a deity called Keper, but the process of unfolding, changing, evolving, evoluting. So you have this sameness that evolves or travels and changes into a differentiation to become individuated things in the world and as the world itself. And that process is described in a myth, a mythological story about Ra. Actually, it is the person speaking is Nebuchadnezzar, the words of Nebuchadnezzar, but describing Ra as unfolding, because it's the book of knowing the Keper, the Keperu, the transformations of Ra. Keperu knew Ra, the transformations of Ra. But Nebuchadnezzar is speaking. Nebuchadnezzar is a word or phrase that means master in regards to the limit. And we know that that is limitless. So it's all, so, that's why people translate Nebuchadnezzar in as far as one word, they'll say Lord of all or supreme being. So here we have this Lord of all, or this allness that is describing, in terms of the myth, a character. The allness becomes a character in the myth that's describing the process of how things come from a sameness situation into a differentiated state, which becomes things that we call, things in the world. You see, so it's a process. So it's an unfolding process. So you have Ra, so you have Shu, Tef, Nut, Geb, Nut, and then Wasir, Aset, Satuk, Nebet, Hut, and so on and so on and so forth. To the point where, humanity is mentioned, where humanity is coming straight from the tears of Ra. Ra cries and people pop up. So now that's told in a figurative way. So we know that human beings don't come from anybody's salty tears. So anyway, I'm just saying that it's very, very interesting. So this is right along the lines of myth versus science. Now, myth needs to stay myth and science needs to stay science. And they can coexist. We can talk about these things together without saying either or, yeah, accept this myth or accept this science, or this science trumps this myth, or this myth trumps this science, and things like that. So I think that was one of the points that we wanted to make last night. I don't know if that hit home really good last night, but that was one of the points.
I think it might have hit home last night. I heard the one brother say, kind of like when he was swaying back and forth when you guys were talking and kind of, I guess, winning them over, or kind of convincing them, to be more logical about it. And because at first he was like, I'm getting rid of all my books. You guys like, no, don't get rid of all your books. And you started breaking it down, explaining to him. He was like, all right, well, too bad for y'all. Y'all explained it to me. Now I'm keeping my books, and when he said that, it made me think, okay, he's separating it now. In his mind, he kind of got the separation, science, myth, and he's okay with it. Because at first he was like conflicting with it, like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean they're not going together? What do you mean, this myth is not scientifically sound? And then once you would tell him about the wall, you're like, okay, you hit the wall. He was like, what do you mean? Okay, he was like, yeah, you're right. I hit a wall. He was like, okay, once you hit that wall, you got to stop. That's where you have to divide it. Science has to stay with science, and myth has to stay with myth. But I kind of think you got it.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, because what I was trying to get him to understand is that science has its rules, and if you break the rules, it's no longer science. Just like basketball has its rules. If I were to try to hit the basketball court and just walk from one end to the other and shoot the ball, I would be violating the rules. I wouldn't be really playing basketball if I just walked out of bounds and I shot at any basket, you know, either basket I wanted to and stuff like that. I wouldn't really be playing basketball. So you can't do things within science and not abide by the rules. So that's what I was trying to get across to him, is that myth has less rules, strictness than science. Science has strict rules, where myth, it's figurative. So, you know, you can tell a story. It's just that the science behind your myth needs to go along with it in order to be able to decode it. And that's, I don't know if I mentioned this last night, but myth, you know, in terms of the way that a lot of African communities use myth, it's an encoding. You know, you encode, let's just say science, because myth can represent science or anything. You know, it could represent whatever. But and when it represents science, it's still it's an encoding. You take science, or you take realities, you encode them in a figurative way, consolidate them into a narrative called a story, and we call it a myth. Now, it takes a person who is knowledgeable about the encoding process to be able to decode it, to basically explode the myth back out into reality. So you start with the reality, you convert it to a figurative expression, and then store it. And then when somebody else comes along, they grab the stored figurative expression, and they have to decode it and blow it back out to the reality. So you have an encoding process and a decoding process. This encoding and decoding process takes knowledge of the encoder, the legend or the key to be able to do this. This is what was kept in initiation systems or initiation circles and things. And outside of that, you lose it, and you're grabbing the myth and you're just running with it. And that's what happens today. We're so far removed. Even the Bible, even the Abrahamic traditions, the Bible itself, the Bible is comprised of many books, but let's just choose one. Let's say Genesis. Genesis is a creation story. One of the creation stories, we call it a creation story. Obviously that myth is written in a figurative way. We know that snakes don't talk. We know that, you know, man didn't come from mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on some dirt, and that woman didn't come from a broken rib. You know, we know that, and all that stuff that's in Genesis. So it's written in a figurative way, but obviously the realities that's behind there got lost in the sauce, because people are taking the figurative expressions literally. And that's where the arguments are. That's where the debates are. The debates is like, well, how can God create plants on the fourth day when they didn't even create the sun, and the sun was created on the third day or something? You know, whatever the argument is about the days, the discrepancy with the days, the stars and the moon, sun and the moon, or whatever. Sun, moon, and stars were created on the second day or third day. Then what constitutes a day? I thought a day was when the rotation of the earth, 24 hours. You know, all those silly debate. I call them silly because if you have an understanding of figurative expressions and stuff, then your conversation would just be totally different. You wouldn't have this back and forth debate over figurative. Like, nobody's arguing over Peter Pan, the story of Never Never Land and Peter Pan. Nobody's arguing over issue book 143 of the X-Men series book, comic books. Nobody's arguing over that, because you understand it to be a comic book. You understand it that the writers wrote what they wrote, the artists drew what they drew, and, you know, the movie makers made what they made, you know, whatever the case is. So that's, you know, we have to understand that that's what's going on. See, put everything in its proper context. It kind of relaxes the mode and the environment. People can relax, and we can have a really good conversation about it. So myth stays a myth, science stays a science. They can coexist. They can party hardy all day long. Nobody has a problem with it until you try to take one for the other or pit one against the other and things like that.
Yeah, and obviously you still have to do the due diligence to you know, really understand both. Just like you say with science, you have to really understand, there are rules. So you have to understand that before you're going into the discussion. And also just the same with myths, because some people just hop on anything and be like, okay, he's not dealing with science, so I can just give a twist of my own translation of what it means. But also with the myths, again, you have to, there is a process. You have to understand the language first and foremost before you actually dive into to the deeper meanings behind it. And I guess that's where people, the people hit the wall, because they're having a discussion of two areas that need a lot of work, need knowledge, and they lack on both ends on that. So that's, I guess, I was just trying to say that on both ends they're still similar in a way that you have to understand both areas. You have to be fully knowledgeable pretty much in all of that before you get into a discussion. Otherwise it's going to be one hell of a mess. you know
Yeah, but see, that's a good point, because science has strict rules. It's about method and procedures and rules, and myth is would appear to be loose, but it has its set of you have to have an understanding. You have to be grounded in the culture. You have to be, and this is where philosophy kind of marries and meets science as well, or the two, need to be used together, because you have to get into the psyche of the people and within the culture to understand the realities behind the figurative speech, which is what a myth ends up becoming. And so a myth could be about anything. Now, whether science and absolute, observable data and everything like that is the reality behind a particular myth, only a person that is part and parcel of the culture and the psyche and the development, and it was conditioned to understand that, will be able to know and deal with it and point that out. But if we're far removed and all we have is the myth, and we don't know the realities behind the myth, then we have to, like I said last night, we have to put in some extraordinary work to trace that out. And one of the tools a brother Asar Hotep uses and brought up was linguistics, historical comparative linguistics, where, because we have to remember, language is the DNA of the culture, and it transmits the culture. It encapsulates the psyche of the people, your words and what they meaning and form, the concepts behind the word, the whole mental lexicon that people walk around with is shared by a group of people of the same speech community. So they agree organically. They agree by default on these concepts, that or else they wouldn't be able to communicate with one another. So that's in the psyche of the people. And if you're not a member of that psychological community, then you're not going to know the realities behind the way that things were expressed. You see, so that's very important. So it takes a lot of work, because we can tap into the language to figure these things out. And so that would be the more that would be, like, for lack of a better word, that would be the kind of rules that will be needed on the myth side. And then science, on the science side, has its set of rules, its whole procedure, the scientific method, and so on and so forth. So that's really important. But I don't want to drag this out.
You see, Asar in the side chat. He said, "Read the citation he posted in the group."
Okay, Hotep, I didn't see it. Let me see. Let me pull it up in the in our group, the session group.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it. Shekan the Jiab to the rescue. All right. This is in light of our conversation last night on YouTube. All right, I'll just read it all. It's not too long. Now this is quoting Shekan the Jiab from Civilization and Barbarism and Authentic Anthropology, 1991, pages 322 to 323. And it says, a vigorous, valuable manner of building a modern science on the terrain of African tradition, recognized as such from the legacy of the past, for a young African astrophysician would be to tackle the verification of the annual rotation of Sirius's companion around its own axis, a movement predicted by the Dogon cosmogony, and which modern astronomy has not yet been able to either confirm or invalidate. But the African initiatory tradition degrades the quasi-scientific thoughts that it received during very ancient periods instead of enriching them with time. We could review, in light of the Egyptian thought, all the African cosmogonies and thus rediscover their often lost profound meaning. Does this mean that today these cosmogonies have the status of a self-conscious philosophical thought? Certainly during pre-colonial epochs, when they were intensely lived, these cosmogonies were infinitely close to a self-conscious thought, but they have since become degraded, fossilized, and it would be excessive to take them for philosophical systems at this point in time. Similarly, it would be an error to conduct a bogus debate on them. And that's quoting Sheikh Anta. Now, to continue with what Asar says, notice that he challenges modern African scientists to verify or falsify scientific and philosophical concepts found in ancient African cosmogonies and myths. He advocates building a modern science and not being stuck on ancient concepts of reality that may not be so. Some of our people have yet to realize this. The ancient Egyptian texts, its mythos and maxims, are calling for us today to become scientists. If you are a priest of Ptah and you are not an architect or a metallurgist, you are kidding yourself. You can't worship Imhotep without espousing to be a medical doctor. If you appreciate the zodiac of Dendera, then become an astrophysicist. There is no escaping science. And that's so true. So that's good. So I appreciate that quote. And that's so true. And and to add another example in there, people who are claiming to be a high priest of so and so and so and so, I will add to that if you cannot understand and comprehend the language of ancient Egypt in its classical form that people call Middle Egyptian or whatever text, then I beg the question that how can you be a priest in a particular area, because, and that's a science in and of itself. How can you represent it? Because all a priest is somebody with a very important job. How can you have a job of importance and conduct the duties of that job if you are not familiar with what the job entails, what was recorded, what was left, what was attested, so on and so forth. And most of the high priests, indigenous high priests, they are part and parcel of the speech community itself. You're not gonna go to a Ifa priest and then they have no idea of what's spoken in Yoruba.
Yeah,
so on and so forth. And I'm sure you can speak on that, Emike.
No, no, but I just wanted to say what you're saying that I believe you couldn't be a priest if you couldn't, and we're dealing with Kemet here, you couldn't be a priest if you couldn't read or write, the language itself and the script. Yeah, that's kind of odd as well. So it's a good point that you mentioned, because you have all these high priests and high priestesses who can't read who can't read or even write. But yeah, so that's just a little oxymoron.
Exactly. Well, that would be like a bare minimum. But yes, this a good. So we're challenged, and we had to become science. We can't escape science, And I think we take a lot of things for granted, and we don't respect the path or the journey in certain directions. Like, for example, when it comes to chemistry, you don't see people arguing on social media about chemistry or astrophysics things to the degree that you see people argue over I guess what will be termed different religious conversations and things like that, even with language or with Kemet or the Middle East, and things, because there's an understanding that, okay, when I say astrophysics, people understand that, wait a minute, let me slow down. Let me understand terminology, definitions of the terms, how they're used among astrophysicists and things like that. People kind of have a respect for it. But for some reason, when it comes to Kemet, everybody's quick to Google and then all of a sudden become an expert, overnight expert, and then try to sit there and argue with you about it. Didn't do, apply no rigor to anything, but they won't do the same thing with speaking to an astrophysicist about astrophysics, or a chemist with chemistry, you know, a lawyer with law, with maybe the exception of some of the Moors, you know, they go toe to toe. But even then, that kind of speaks to my point, though. The Moors, and I don't want to just put it on Moors, but you see how Moors be, they're competent about the law, but that's just it. They took their time. The Moors that argue law, at least they took their time to get the Black Laws Dictionary, to look up the federal laws, the federal statutes, the state laws. They you know, take time to learn that, you know, before they try to argue and stuff. So people need to really do that with all the things that we see people argue with. You know, if you want to argue linguistics, languages and stuff like that, learn the historical comparative method, learn the method, at least do the literature review from those who have done the method before you try to argue about languages and things dealing with language.
Quick question. I was just wondering, especially when you're discussing astrophysics and all that, do you think it's probably because within those fields of study, there are institutions that are already set up to dictate what is it that is termed as an expert in those fields, as opposed to what we have with when we're dealing with Kemet, where it's just like a free buffet for for everyone. We don't have like proper institutions. Obviously we have individuals doing work and smaller groups doing work, but we don't have institutions set up to actually put into play what it is that is being studied. What is it that we term as an expert in this particular field? And
yeah, that's a very good point, and that's a key word: institutions. Today, that's what we would call them. In the past, there would be initiation houses, initiation environments where people are walked procedurally, step by step, systematically through a process of learning, you know, and the output is you become an expert in a particular, on a particular subject, or, you know, particular area of life, or whatever the case is. And then you can be deemed a priest, because, you know, we had a show, we did a show. It's in one of our archives where we discussed priests, you know, and we kind of use that loosely today, you know, that term loosely, but it's a person with a very important job, a person, you know, like today, you get hurt, you go to a doctor. Well, actually, the first line of defense, you may go to the general admissions. I don't know how the hierarchy goes, but you go to the first level of a person that sees you. You know, they'll check you. They'll put the dipstick in your mouth and check your vitals. You know, your heartbeat, tell you to breathe, all that stuff, and then fill out some paper. Then a doctor will come in, and a doctor will examine, do what he does. But then if it's beyond his knowledge or his expertise, then they'll bring in a specialist. And so it's the same thing, where a priest will be at that higher echelon of a professional or expert. Matter of fact, I just see what Asar said. A priest is just an expert, exactly, or better yet, a professional at a craft or trade. And that's it. We had a whole show on that, you know. So, you know, if you're going to be diagnosing people's spirit, then you have to be an expert in spiritism, you know, what a spirit is or whatever. You know, if you're going to help heal somebody, you have to have knowledge of the anatomy of the body. Before you can cut somebody open, you got to know the anatomy of the body, how the systems in the body work with each other, and, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, but I don't want to go too long. How long we been on? We've been on for about 2 hours. Oh, it's 12 o'clock. We've been on for quite a while now. So, but anyway, yeah. So hopefully people got what I said when I brought up the periodic table, the constituent parts of an atom, and how the series of numbers repeat itself within the atom and then out external to the atom among the elements on the chart, and this and that. It's very, very interesting. You know, very, very interesting. I think, you know, we may revisit this conversation and expand on it and get some more input from other people about this. You know, it's interesting. doesn't have a direct relation to the language, but we were talking about science versus myth, or creation, cosmogony stories, cosmological stories, whatever. And indigenous people, you know, seemingly to have a need to have one. Like they have one. Like you look everywhere, somebody has this creation story, you know, whether they came up with it or they basically bit off of someone else's, you know. But yeah, go ahead.
Now, yeah, I was just gonna say that was actually a great post that Asa put on the Sishu group page, and obviously, I guess it all ties back to what we were discussing, and with creation being an ongoing process and all that. So even with ours, with the study of science and all, and the myths that we have from from all the different African traditions and all that, is something that we have to continue. The work still has to continue. We still have to, we have to embrace science and continue, developing that, because I mean, creation doesn't stop, right? So, so we can't just stop or be, stuck on trying to, figuring out what all of that stuff, instead of just improving on it and, trying to gain a deeper understanding, always observing nature, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you have it. So, I don't have anything else to add, because if I start again, we're gonna go another 2 hours. And last night we had a 5 hour plus hangout. Like I said, the first 3 hours was a good discussion, good topic, things brought up. Then after that, it kind of spiraled out into something else. So it was fruitful conversation up to that point, I think, and we need to continue. We had to have progressive, fruitful conversations and things. And like I said, I think if people slow down and really just leave things what they are, like we have to be honest. We have to properly identify with things. Like I'm always hard on misnomers and how we label things and categorize things. I give it an example. If I take some salt and put it into a clear jar, but I label it sugar, then somebody could slip up and put a whole bunch of salt into a drink, and it will ruin it. So it's important how we label things and have some kind of system of labeling things where we don't misguide or mislead. And I think a lot of conversations is based on miscommunication, improper use of terminology, depending on what field and issue that you're dealing with, and so on. And it comes from us being lazy, people being lazy, not looking into it and rushing. Because see, it's easy access. Social media is easy access. Everybody has a keyboard, cell phone. They could thumb type and text a message, and nobody does any research before, and we just do it so fast. It's like speaking, it's like pulling the cart before the horse. You speak before you've done any homework on it. And I think if people slow down and do a little bit more homework, the quality of the conversations will just be a lot better. And I think we'll get more progress done. So that's what I try to maintain and do with us as a group. And then me personally, and when I intermingle on social media and stuff, I see a lot of posts up there. Sometimes I don't engage. Sometimes I engage. And if you notice, I don't go anywhere off of the initial claim or question if it's something wrong with it, because you have to fix it. Because I was always taught that it's about trajectory and the path, and truth is very, very straight, like a laser. And if you, I give the example, if you had a laser on a vice grips locked into place, and the laser is pointing at a target, and the target is 10 yards away, and you got it fixed to the bullseye of the target, and you pull the target away from the source, another 20 yards, 30 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, and it still maintains the dot on the bullseye, then you're aligned. But now what happens is, this is basic angles and geometry. If you go back to the vice grip and you adjust the laser beam, the source of the laser, 1 degree up, straight up, 1 degree up, you put that target back at the 10-yard mark, the dot will still hit the bullseye. But the further you pull it away from the source of the beam, of the laser beam, the dot will start getting off of the bullseye and move upward, 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 upward. The further back you go, the farther away the laser beam will hit. It'll be off target to the point where it won't even hit the target paper at all. So that what that represents is that how far away are we are from what we're analyzing. We really have to be careful of staying on the straight and narrow. Otherwise, we could be way off target and end up in left field and be totally off. And I see that a lot. And this is something we have to keep in mind and do our best to guard against. You know, we have to stay on point, on target. And the least we could do is to get to know the nomenclature of the field that you're talking about. If you're talking about law, learn legal jargon. You talk about linguistics, learn linguistic jargon, notation. If you're talking about astrophysics, learn, you know, all of that. Medicine, everything, whatever. You know, anyway, so that's it. That's my 2 cents, my 9 cents for tonight. I guess anybody else got something to say? If not, MEK, you can, if you will bless us with a closing.
Okay. Dua. And yeah, a dua to all those who've been tuning in and you know, giving their input. And if you'd like to, you know, get into more of such discussions, I would recommend that you join our group page, which is Seshumani Medinetro on Facebook. And if you'd like to learn the language, so you could, you know, have be part of the discussion as well, you know, go to medunetro.com, mdw-ntr.com, and sign up for the language. And we have a book, a beginner's book that you know, the information is also on the webpage. We also have the book by the Seshumani Medinetro, which is discussing the decipherment and just goes into the basics of writing system and how they work. You can get that also on the webpage. It's also on Amazon. You know, and what else am I forgetting? Yeah, Dua. I know it's you know, it's late and you guys are tuning in, and we really appreciate that. We appreciate you know, all the input. And with that, I'd like to say, Shem Hotep, go in peace.